We are beginning the 167th week of the Biblical Shakers blog with the reading of the 5 chapters from the book of 2 Samuel, beginning with chapter 4. You will be invited to read a chapter each day, followed by the corresponding devotion written by one of my family members. You can find out more about us by going to biblicalshakers.blogspot.com and hit on one of the drop downs, which will include a little history about the writings and the authors. Now, on to chapter 4 of 2 Samuel. Last week, we left off our reading with David as the king of Judah and Ishbosheth as the king of Israel. Ishbosheth had just lost his military leader, Abner. He was a man who took his courage from another rather than from God, and Ishbosheth collapsed from fear under pressure. David called him an innocent man and knew of his weakness. He had no intention of killing him. However, in chapter 4, someone else took care of that, which displeased David. God's people do not, quote, do evil that good may come, unquote, but rather they, quote, overcome evil with good, unquote. In chapter 5, we read that David was finally crowned king over all Israel. As an outlaw, life had looked bleak, but God's promise to make him king over all Israel was now being fulfilled at the age of 37. After David became king, his first order of business was to subdue his enemies, a task the nation had failed to complete when they entered the promised land. David knew this had to be done in order to 1, protect the nation, 2, unify the kingdom, and 3, prepare for building the temple, which would unify religion under God and help abolish idolatrous influence. In chapter 6, we see that David wanted to honor God by having the ark in the new capital, Jerusalem. The plan of moving the ark had all the marks of success, with 30,000 choice men assisting him. The first try ended in catastrophe because the rules of the moving were not followed. The second try ended in success just 3 months later with celebration that not all of the household agreed upon. How would you respond if God said no to one of your greatest ambitions, something that you were sure would please him? David wanted to build a house for the Lord, but God would not permit him to do so. The prophet Nathan gave him this information. God told David that his job was to unify and lead Israel and to destroy its enemies. This huge task would require David to shed a great deal of blood. God did not want his temple built by a warrior. David would collect the materials as recorded in the 7th chapter. Also, chapter 7 includes the covenant God made with David, promising to carry on David's line forever, which is realized in the birth of Jesus Christ. Part of God's covenant with David included the promise that the Israelites' enemies would be defeated and would no longer oppress them. God fulfilled this promise by helping David defeat the opposing nations, as we read in chapter 8. David knew that he would not build the temple, but he risked his life to gather the wealth Solomon would need to do the job. King David's reign was characterized by doing what was just and right. What an interesting 5 chapters we've read this week. You'll have to check in next week for another 5 from 2 Samuel. And remember, Biblical Shakers makes reading the Bible way more enjoyable for you. And I pray the Lord will put a hunger on your heart.